Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, lend me your attention. I stand before you on the edge of history, not tomorrow, not next quarter, today, because the collapse has begun. You feel the tremors, right? You see your wages stagnate. You feel your future shrinking. You've been told this is temporary, just a blip. But it's happening, right now. We are living through the unraveling of a system that once seemed unbreakable. This moment isn't coming. It is already here. You see, people love the comfort of denial. They wrap themselves in the warm blankets of someday, of maybe, of not yet. They wait for signs, for sirens, for official announcements to declare that the world has changed. But the truth is, it already has. The silence you hear, that's not peace. It's the pause before the thunder. The ground has already shifted. The center is no longer holding, and those waiting for a storm are standing in the middle of its eye. The system we were told would last forever, it's unraveling in real time, not with the noise of war, but with the quiet betrayal of numbers, of budgets that don't balance, of households that can't afford bread, of young people buried in debt before they've even earned their first real paycheck. You're not watching the beginning, you're witnessing the middle. This is what it feels like when an empire starts to sweat, when a machine starts to stall, when the illusion begins to crack. The old powers are shaking, not because they didn't see this coming, but because they thought they were invincible. They thought they could overextend, overconsume, overpromise, and never pay the price. But there's a law in life. Everything comes due, eventually, and this is the due date. This isn't a theory anymore. It's not a prediction. Look around you. The price of everything is rising while the value of wages remains chained. The wealth gap isn't a statistic anymore, it's a scar across the faces of our cities. And people, good people, are being pushed to the edges, not because they are lazy or weak, but because the system no longer rewards work. It punishes it, and here's the punchline: those at the top, they know, they see it too. That's why they're cashing out, diversifying, buying land, hedging in gold, jumping into digital assets, and preparing exit strategies. Because when the house burns, the architects never stay inside. But here's the thing: they're not the only ones who can see. You can too. You feel it in your gut. That unease, that isn't paranoia. It's your instincts whispering, telling you that the world is being rearranged in real time. That what used to work won't work anymore. That waiting will cost you more than moving. The tragedy is not that systems fall. Systems fall all the time. The real tragedy is when people sit idle, romanticizing what was, while ignoring what is. Don't you dare fall in love with the past. It doesn't love you back. Don't you dare wait for someone to save you. No one is coming. You are the plan. What separates leaders from followers isn't just vision. It's urgency. It's the ability to move when others freeze. It's the ability to act without perfect information. Because perfection is a luxury for those who are not hungry. But you're starving for freedom, for dignity. For truth, so act like it. The collapse isn't just economic. It's intellectual. It's spiritual. It's the breakdown of trust in institutions, in media, in leadership. People don't believe anymore, not because they're cynical, but because they've been lied to. And when trust dies, society follows. So what now? What happens when the center breaks and the edges rise? What happens when truth returns, not as a whisper, but as a roar? You adapt, you build, you reinvent. You realize that power is never lost. It is only transferred. And this transfer, it's happening now. From the old world to the new, from corporations to creators, from institutions to individuals, from control to consciousness. This moment isn't coming, it is already here, and if you still need a sign, you're not paying attention. The game has changed, the rules are bending, and the scoreboard is being reset. You can either participate in history or be erased by it. Choose. There comes a time in every empire's life when the glow starts to dim, the roar softens, the footsteps, once thunderous across the globe, begin to echo back into silence, and yet those living in the empire often don't see the cracks, not at first. They still walk with their chests high, drunk on memories of former glory, unaware that the world has already started writing their obituary. Economic dominance doesn't die in a day, it erodes slowly. Silently, then suddenly, all at once. You wake up one morning, and the markets you once controlled have slipped from your grasp. The currency that once commanded fear is now being traded with caution. Countries that used to beg for your investment are now building their own tables, and they're not sending you an invitation. And while you're still focused on preserving an old narrative, the new game is being played in another language, on another continent, with rules you no longer understand. It starts with arrogance, that belief that your success is permanent, that history bows to you, but history has never bowed to anyone. It doesn't kneel, it doesn't serve, it rotates. And when your time is up, it turns the page with or without your permission. Once, the world lined up for trade deals. Now, they shop around. Once, your aid came with applause. Now, it comes with resistance. Once, your corporations ran the show. Now, new titans are rising from places you once called developing. And they're not interested in playing second fiddle. The most dangerous lie an empire tells itself is that it can never fall, that its systems are too sophisticated, its power too entrenched, its wealth too vast. But what history teaches us, if we dare to study, it is that every empire, without exception, has an expiry date. And that date is rarely printed on a calendar. It shows up in trade imbalances, in failing infrastructure, in the rage of the middle class, in the silence of innovation, in the fatigue of the working poor. And you can't tariff your way out of decline. You can't sanction your way out of irrelevance. You can't bomb your way into respect. Real economic power isn't how loudly you speak, it's how many people lean in when you whisper. Now, let's be clear. Decline doesn't mean collapse, not yet. But it does mean that the crown is slipping, that the seat at the head of the table is now up for contest. And the contestants are not coming with warships, they're coming with strategy. With infrastructure, with long-term investments, with energy deals, with smart cities, with AI. They are playing the long game while the empire is busy replaying old wins. When your dominance fades, so does your influence. And that's where the real damage begins, because influence, not weapons, not banks, is what drives global loyalty. If your name no longer inspires trust, your deals no longer command commitment. If your story no longer inspires ambition, your culture no longer drives relevance. You see, the world doesn't care who is great. It only listens to who is relevant, and relevance is a moving target. One day you have it, the next day you're chasing it. But here's the harsh truth. Those who were once feared are now being studied not for inspiration, but for lessons on what not to do. So what do you do when the sun starts setting on your empire? You can cling to nostalgia, or you can pivot with purpose. You can either preserve old models or embrace new ones. The ones who win are those who acknowledge reality, not those who resist it, because the world has changed, power has moved, and those who fail to move with it will be left behind, shouting at a future that no longer hears them. The economic dominance of yesterday is no guarantee of tomorrow. The giants of today must become students again, or they'll wake up one day to find themselves surrounded by nations they once called small, now standing taller, walking faster, and speaking louder than ever before. And that, right there, is how decline feels not like a crash, but like a slow fade into silence. Denial is not a strategy. It is the soft lullaby people sing to themselves when the truth becomes too loud. When the data is screaming, when the ground is shaking, when the mirror is no longer flattering, what do people do? They look away. They change the subject. They convince themselves that this storm will pass, that the noise will settle, that tomorrow will look like yesterday. But history doesn't move in reverse. It never has. It doesn't care about your comfort. It responds to your actions, or your refusal to act. When systems fail, when empires begin to stumble, the first reaction is rarely to adapt. It's denial, not because people are blind, but because they're afraid to admit that the game has changed, afraid to acknowledge that the tools they used to build their dominance are now rusting in their hands. They hold on not out of strength, but out of fear. They double down, hoping that willpower will fix what wisdom refuses to face. But denial is expensive. It's not passive. It comes with interest. Because when you deny reality, you don't stop the fall, you accelerate it. Every ignored warning sign, every suppressed truth, every delayed decision adds fuel to the fire. It builds pressure, and when pressure has nowhere to go, It erupts. You see it everywhere, in leaders who pretend everything is under control, in governments that manipulate numbers instead of facing them, in economies where growth is manufactured, not earned. They don't fix the system, they fix the narrative, and narratives can win votes, but they don't pay bills. They don't feed families. They don't repair broken infrastructure or mend broken trust. Denial is seductive. It whispers that if you just wait long enough, things will magically return to normal. That maybe this is just a cycle. That maybe it's the fault of outsiders, enemies, markets, immigrants, competitors. Anything but the system itself. It's always easier to blame a face than to confront a mirror. But blame doesn't build. It breaks. And while you're pointing fingers, the foundation beneath you is collapsing. The hardest thing to do when you're successful is to admit that the success might be fading. It's a threat to your identity, to everything you've known. But here's the truth. Those who can't confront their own decline will never rise again. You can't transform what you refuse to acknowledge. You can't fix what you pretend isn't broken. And the world, it's not waiting for you. It's moving, fast. While one side is busy spinning stories, the other side is building systems. While some are denying inflation, others are investing in digital currency. While one economy is defending outdated trade models, others are creating parallel markets. While the empire is clinging to tradition, the rest of the world is innovating with audacity. This is how decline becomes collapse. Not because the threats were too big, but because the leaders were too proud, because they wanted applause more than awareness. They mistook silence for peace. They mistook obedience for trust. And by the time the truth became undeniable, it had already become unmanageable. Look closely at any fallen empire. The fall never starts at the bottom. It starts at the top with leaders who believed they were too smart to fail, too powerful to fall. And it is that arrogance that writes the first line of every collapse story. Denial doesn't just ignore the fire, it feeds it. Because while the truth can be harsh, it can also be freeing. It gives you a chance to pivot. But when you choose the lie, you lose the luxury of time. So the question is simple. Are you willing to face it? Because the fall is not inevitable. But it is unstoppable if you continue pretending it's not happening. Courage is not loud. It's not theatrical. Sometimes it's as quiet as saying, yes, the system is broken. And then doing the work to fix it. The longer you wait, the higher the cost. The world won't slow down because you're afraid to admit you're behind. It won't pause so you can catch your breath. It doesn't negotiate with denial. It rewards action and punishes hesitation. So decide. You can keep pretending or start preparing. You said, trade wars are not acts of strength. They are not strategic plays from a position of control. They are desperate last-minute throws from regimes running out of ideas, out of influence, and out of time. They are the Hail Mary passes of global economics, launched into the air with fingers crossed and no plan for what happens if it falls short. And when the ball drops, it doesn't just hit the ground, it shatters supply chains. It scorches consumer pockets, and it burns trust between trading partners built over decades. You don't start trade wars when you're winning. You start them when you're bleeding influence, when your industries are aging and your innovations are slowing, when competitors no longer wait for your permission to lead. It's not about protection. It's about panic. It's the policy equivalent of standing on the table in a boardroom, shouting directions because you know the team has stopped listening. It's noisy, it's loud, it might even look powerful from a distance. But it's not control, it's chaos dressed in patriotism. Let's call it what it is. A tantrum disguised as a tactic. Because the truth is, in a global economy, nobody wins a trade war. Not really. One side may posture harder. One side might impose heavier tariffs, but at the end of it all, it's the consumer that bleeds. Prices rise. Access shrinks. Jobs that were promised to return stay outsourced. And small businesses, the backbone of any real economy, get crushed in the crossfire between egos. Tariffs are not strategy, they're punishment, and like all punishment without purpose, they don't teach lessons, they provoke retaliation. You slap tariffs on steel, they target your agriculture. You block their tech, they shut down your access to rare earth minerals. And suddenly, it's not policy anymore, it's economic warfare with no end game, no roadmap, just pride on both sides waiting to blink first. And here's the irony. The very people trade wars claim to protect are the first to pay the price. Workers, manufacturers, consumers, the average person walking into a store to buy bread, fuel, medicine, they're the ones holding the bill. Meanwhile, the architects of these policies sit in glass towers, playing chess with pieces they don't have to live among. This isn't leadership, it's political theater, it's a headline tactic. It gives the illusion of action while avoiding the hard work of reinvention, because real strategy, it takes time, it takes vision. It takes admitting that the world has changed and you need to change with it, but that's difficult, that requires courage. Trade wars, on the other hand, are easy. They're blunt, force instruments in a game that requires surgical precision. And let's talk about long-term consequences. You don't just lose trade in a trade war, you lose trust. You lose the goodwill that took generations to build. You teach your trading partners that you're unpredictable, that your handshake doesn't mean much, that your agreements are only valid when they suit you. And trust, once lost, doesn't come back with a treaty. It takes years, even decades, to rebuild. The world is watching how you behave when power starts slipping, watching how you respond to competition. And when your answer is isolationism wrapped in nationalism, the message is clear: you're not adapting, you're retreating. But here's the thing: you can't tariff innovation. You can't sanction progress. You can't blockade talent. The future is borderless. The economy of tomorrow won't be led by the loudest or the most forceful. It will be led by the most adaptable, the most open, the most collaborative, those who build bridges, not barricades. So let's stop pretending these trade wars are strategies. They are symptoms of fear, of decline, of leadership that would rather fight shadows than face the sunlight of reality. You don't win the future by fighting the past. You win it by facing the present, head on, with clarity, with courage, with vision. Because while you're launching desperate passes, the world is already building new fields, and they're playing a completely different game. The collapse has begun. But your courage, your awareness, your refusal to shrug it off, those can be the sparks that light a new future. This moment demands more than passive observation. It demands boldness, clarity, and relentless action, because when the system cracks, you can either watch it burn or build something stronger in its ashes. Let's choose to build. Thank you.